This is Ivy Unleashed, a Gold Ivy production. Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. We're so happy you're here. It's summertime. It's exciting, and something that we're all thinking about all the time, I know I am, is food. And we are super excited to have Jenn Trepeck here. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
We are so excited because, like Jenn, it's important for us to break down health and wellness, simplify it so that it doesn't have to rule our life, just like food does. Food plays such a huge role in that. It's, not only eating when we're hungry, but also understanding what this food is doing. It's a huge topic. So first of all, thank you. We appreciate the work that you do.
Yes, Jenn is the host of Salad with a Side of Fries podcast. She's also an optimal health coach. And like Brooke said, she breaks things down into these bite-sized pieces of information, which is totally what we do on Ivy Unleashed. We like to simplify wellness. It can be overwhelming. And so we have a lot of food questions for Jenn. We're excited to get into it. But first, we want to hear your story. We always like hearing, what was your childhood like, your younger years, and how you got into this path of your career.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. It means the world to hear that we're making a difference. So thank you. So I joke that I grew up the skinny one in a family of dieters, and I was a dancer growing up. So I think I was more aware of my body. And so sort of skipping ahead, when I started to gain weight, then because I had that body awareness, I think my noticing of it and my reaction of it or to it was maybe more dramatic than somebody else might have noticed, but I had that, proprioception, like the internal awareness of like where my body is in space and what's happening. But so, growing up, it was like I ate healthy foods. I ate when I was hungry. I didn't eat when I wasn't hungry. But somebody in my house was always on a diet. And most of the time it's my dad. And I say that with all the love in the world. But like I grew up, there was a picture of like a man's abs on our refrigerator. And that was like an old like 80s, 90s, quote unquote wellness hack that, whatever. It was like beat yourself up into submission.
Totally. And we do it with social media. I'm just like thinking now it's just on your Instagram.
Now it's way more accessible to you.
Yeah.
And so, I would come home from school. There was like Nutrisystem in the pantry. And so I'd be like, Dad, can I eat this? And he's like, sure, whatever. It's what was there. And we were all sort of eating according to whatever the latest fad was that, we were on the bandwagon. And so I really didn't, I started to gain weight like between high school and college. I'd gone on birth control, and also in college, right, everything changed from, not dancing 85 times a week and such a weird schedule where it wasn't fully the whole day, every day occupied and all these things. So I started to gain weight, and I was like, all right, well, I know what to do because I watched my family do this my whole life. Right. And you do this diet and then that diet and then all the things, gain and lose, the roller coaster over and over. I graduated from the business school at the University of Michigan, moved to New York. I also interned in New York every summer in college. And so it was also this yo-yo thing between like summers and then, back to life kind of a thing. So I moved to New York after graduating, and I started working, and I was like, okay, I'm bored. Like I need something else. I don't know what I'm going to do. I just know I can't work for somebody else for the rest of my life. And at the same time, I had this like saga happening with, my weight management. And then the worlds collided. I learned about the program that I've based my practice on. And by the way, at first I was like, no, I don't need whatever you have. Like I've got my thing. My thing was the crazy roller coaster, but it didn't matter, right? I thought that's what it was. And then I saw people who were following, this lifestyle, I guess. And I noticed two things. One was that they were keeping the weight off. And the second thing was this one woman, I don't even know her name. I don't know where she is, but she was telling her story of losing like 150 pounds and keeping it off. And I don't know what she said after that, because I was having like my own conversation in my head, staring at her like, this doesn't even compute. I can't see where 10 pounds could have been on your body. And you're telling me that the equivalent of another human was attached to you. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And so I had this moment with myself of like, Jennifer, like, get over yourself, because they know something you don't know. Because from what you know, that's not possible. So I worked with a coach. I followed the program, 12 weeks. I really call it like the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us. And it completely changed my life. Like, the only thing that's allowed me to say I've kicked my food issues. And so from there, I really set out on a mission to pay it forward and help people help themselves with this information. Because, I mean, we're expected to live in this world and no one's ever taught us any of this. And the food world just gets more and more complicated. So I started health coaching on the side of my full-time job. This was like late 2007. Fast forward, I didn't leave my full-time job till July of 2019. But that's when I launched the podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, because really I don't know what to do with free time. And so it was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Little did I know, right? Fast forward. But, now here I am sitting with the two of you.
I love it. Like you said, it's what wasn't taught. No one teaches us nutrition in school, and nutrition is everything. For me, it was how I healed depression, how I healed my illness, how I'm still surviving and thriving. It all comes back to food. And to your point, it's not something they teach you. So I'm curious how you found this program, because for you, it was, like you said, it was your way. So what were you trying? And when was that switch to, oh, wait, okay, there's this program I could follow that is actually learning and educating myself?
Yeah, well, I had done every diet out there. Like, between my family and I, there isn't a diet that we haven't done or don't know somebody who's done it. The 40-30-30 diet, which today is like macros, kind of. That was the balance of macros at the time that everybody was all excited about. I gained weight on Atkins or South Beach. I gained weight on South Beach. But I tried everything under the sun. I think I had the most success with Weight Watchers, but I also gained the weight back still following Weight Watchers. And I would say I was still, quote unquote, doing Weight Watchers when I learned about this other curriculum. And I really found it because I was looking for business things. And it was sort of a weird, this person introduces you to that person, and, as life happens. But it's so interesting because, like what you were saying about, what we learned in school. I mean, we did learn some things. It just wasn't based on biology. It wasn't based on the human body, right? Like, I don't know about you guys. We learned the food pyramid when I was growing up, right? Is that what you guys both learned too?
Yeah. Yeah. And I also learned about diets through friends and family, like what's socially taught. So yes, totally not the biology, to your point.
Yeah. And like, even the food pyramid, like, that was based on economics, right? It was about getting us to eat what we grow in this country. We grow corn and wheat, now soy also, but which is why that was the biggest part of the food pyramid. That food pyramid wasn't about the human body.
Right.
And so if you take that and fast forward it, right, you also look at, like, I don't know about you, my parents are boomers. And so that was all of like convenience, right? It was like the packaged food, the frozen meals, like, convenience was king at that time. And so now fast forward, everything that we're all living with is the expected snowball effect of that. But we didn't know, we didn't think about it. And so now we're sort of coming to terms with like, well, wait, like, press the pause button for a second, because if this is where it got us, what do we want to do next? Because the systems around us aren't really changing. The systems are continuing in that direction. And we're all sitting here being like, wait, but I don't know that I want that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're getting sicker. We're not liking the way we feel. We're wanting different. And we have the ability nowadays to do different because there's so much more information. There's coaches like you out there that are teaching different ways to do things, sustainable ways, which is what we all need. So can you tap into a little what that is like when clients work with you and you're teaching this education-based, biology-based, what are you teaching? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I want to say it's a 12-week curriculum. So most typical like diets or programs, right? You go week 1, you get the book, and you're supposed to do all 700 things at once, right? And it becomes the next full-time job, and you're like, this is way too much. I can't live my life and do this. So we throw the book out the window, right? The way we approach this is completely the opposite. We're going to learn something and implement it, and then learn the next thing and implement it. So like a college course, you're not going to pass the final on week 1, and we're not expected to. So we might learn something in week 6 or 7 that we've been doing for the last, couple months that might not be our best choice. But that's okay, right? Like we can take the time to figure it out and make the choices and the shifts that we're willing to make in any given moment. So we start with kind of relearning nutrition, or maybe learning it for the first time, which is really all about how does our body process food? How does our body use food? And so how do we fuel such that we have energy? We're not putting our body in fat storage mode, right? And we're burning fuel all the time. And then over the course of the 12 weeks, we get into all the other stuff like sleep and stress and food sensitivities and vacations and events and all of the things that are part of life that make this not quite so easy, right? It's simple, but it's not so easy.
It's great that you give the education piece though, because so many people just don't know the basics around food, and it's all you hear about is what people are trying to sell, right? They're trying to sell a product, they're trying to sell a solution. And so I love that you start with education, because people don't know about blood sugar. They don't know, they're thinking fruit is terrible for you because it's got sugar in it, right? So even just to understand simple versus complex sugars, it's crucial to being able to figure out how to have some energy. So I love that you start with that.
Exactly. And I always say, it's not what to eat, it's how to eat, right? Because you don't need somebody to tell you a cucumber over a Twix, right? Like, duh, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't make not having the Twix any easier. So how do we have a Twix and have it not impact our blood sugar the same way? How do we make the cucumber more appealing? How do we put meals together so that we have energy all day long and we're not crashing at 3:00 and we can start our day not necessarily needing caffeine to function, right? It's all of these pieces that come together. So it's become a little trite. So I'm like hesitating to say it, but yeah, it is like an all foods fit eventually. We got to do a little rehab sometimes with the metabolism, but we can get to a place. I think oftentimes with what's now available to people, it's either the bucket of diet things or the bucket of all foods fit and food freedom and intuitive eating. I approach this as how do we get from point A to point B? That it's not quite as simple as flipping a switch, especially when we have spent years doing the diet roller coaster or restricting or cutting out whole food groups or trying to figure this out in all these different ways.
Yeah, it's behavior change at its core, right? And that first step is really that mindset shift. So I'm curious, how do you get to that with your clients, of that mindset shift around food, of this isn't restriction, this is relearning and helping your body out?
Yeah. So, and the way we start with the mind is actually starting with the food, right? So when we talk about nutrition, it's like, here's how to build a meal. Here's how foods impact our body. So for example, grocery store checkout, right? When they used to have like the baggers, right? There was like a cashier and a bagger, and like you put your stuff up on the conveyor belt, the cashier rings it up, puts it back, the bagger can put the stuff in the bag. When the conveyor belt is coming at like this nice even pace, the bagger does magical things, right? All the frozen things are together. The canned goods are below the bread so that they don't squash it or they don't smash your eggs, right? When the conveyor belt speeds up, The cashier speeds up, and then the bagger throws everything in a bag, shoves it anywhere, and gets it in your cart. Your body kind of works the same way. So when food and fuel come at a nice, even pace, our body releases insulin. Insulin carries all that fuel to our muscles and our cells to be used for energy. Most of our cells can only take in so much fuel at a time, and then they close. But our fat cells never close. So all that extra fuel gets stored as fat, and the extra insulin gets stored as fat when the conveyor belt speeds up. So at a nice even pace, our body can do what it's supposed to do. When the conveyor belt speeds up because we've eaten too much or we've eaten high glycemic foods that spike our blood sugar, it speeds up the conveyor belt. Our body overproduces that insulin. Our muscles and our cells take what they need, and then our fat cells take all the extra. So our objective is to eat foods that keep our blood sugar stable, keep our conveyor belt going, right? And to eat regularly enough to keep the conveyor belt going at this even speed. And then we're never putting ourselves in a fat storage mode in that regard. Now, the other side of that is if we're not eating enough, if our blood sugar is too low, we're also in fat storage mode, because what happens? Going back to the conveyor belt, right? If you put one thing on the conveyor belt, it goes and then it stops. And the cashier rings it up and the bagger puts it in a bag, but they're not giving you the bag. They're holding on to it, waiting for the next thing, right? Your body's doing the same thing. If we're not eating enough, or if we go for long periods of time without eating, our caveman wisdom biology says if food isn't coming, it must be a time of famine. And you will not kill me because I survive above all, right? And so the next thing it gets, it's going to store it as fat so that the body can survive. So in real life, what that looks like is maybe we're not eating enough all day. Maybe I see it with a lot of men. They don't eat all day and then they eat this big dinner. Even if what you ordered for dinner is like what some would call like textbook steamed fish and vegetables, right? Super plain, boring, maybe, but like textbook, your body's going to store that as fat because it thinks it's a time of famine. And on the other side of it, right, spiking our blood sugar, we sit down at the restaurant, we order that textbook steamed fish and vegetables, and we start with the bread basket. The bread spikes our blood sugar. It's like flipping a switch on that conveyor belt. It has sped up, and now your steamed fish and vegetables are stored as fat. So it's not don't eat the bread. It's let's eat the bread with the rest of the food. Maybe we have the bread after a salad so that we're keeping our blood sugar stable. So we're eating quality food at regular enough intervals to keep the conveyor belt going.
That's such a great visual for people because I think, there's two ways to look at it. It's like you can look at the scientific, this is kind of how it works and your body's the system and it's breaking things down. But you can also think about like, I'm going to crash if I don't have any energy coming in, like thinking about that stressful person all day that's not thinking about food and then they're finally going to eat something. It's like, how is your energy level or like your ability to even focus all day? Like, can you imagine if you had some quality foods all day long? And this is like people are all over the map on opinions on this too.
Yeah. I mean, you think about fasting, right? That's a topic in itself. Keto, that's a topic in itself. Burning fat. And I'd love to get into that because you talk about how we can burn fat as fuel without doing keto. So let's tell the listeners a little bit about that.
All right. So first of all, understand keto as a nutritional approach was designed specifically for people with seizures, and at that, children with seizures. And what they saw is that children who ate a ketogenic diet had fewer seizures. I would argue that most people do not have epilepsy, right? Just statistically, we don't all have epilepsy. What's also really interesting about keto, so the whole idea is to get your body into what they call a ketogenic state, where your body is burning ketones, your body is burning fat as fuel. Ketones, when your body is burning ketones, they create a byproduct. It's almost like smoke inside the body. That is why a lot of people following keto have really bad breath, because they have to get rid of that smoke. They have to detoxify and get that out. It is not healthy long-term for our organs to be constantly dealing with that byproduct and having to always detoxify these byproducts. Short-term, there are some benefits of burning fat as fuel. Having said all of that, there's also some issues with keto for people with type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance. A lot of times what we see is that saturated fat is sitting in the insulin receptor sites on a cell. So you might have the insulin, but it has nowhere to go. So especially for people who have insulin sensitivity challenges, we really want to be careful with saturated fat. Unfortunately, a lot of the way that people end up following keto is eating excessive amounts of saturated fat. So not necessarily the solution for everybody for everything, right? And the truth is, like we just talked about, when our blood sugar is in these extremes, we're storing fat. When our blood sugar is in this middle zone, right, we're not storing fat. Our body's actually using the fuel we eat for energy. So we're never adding to those fat stores. And I always say, weight management isn't magic, it's science. But there is a piece that I think is magical, which is when we're consistent, keeping our blood sugar stable and never adding to those fat stores, our body will go, wait a minute, it's not a time of famine. I don't need all this fat I've been holding on to. And your body will actually release its fat stores. They used to say that once you had a fat cell, you always have a fat cell. We see in some of the research with it often as a supplement, it's called conjugated linoleic acid, CLA. It's really like a therapeutic dosage of safflower oil. Your body will actually release fat stores. And in particular, the fat cells between your belly button and your kneecaps. So we're not doomed. There are a lot of options out there. I know, you're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
I know. So we can actually fuel for energy and have the side effect of eliminating the fat that our body is holding on to. Because by the way, just losing weight, making the number on the scale go down is not the objective. Because oftentimes when we do the things that make that happen and make that happen quickly, what we're really losing is water, muscle, and bone. Losing water, muscle, and bone actually slows our metabolism, makes us more prone to injury and more prone to illness and disease. Then, because the scale stops moving and we're frustrated and we go back to old eating habits, we gain the weight back and we gain it back as fat. So over time, we can become fatter at the same number on the scale. So our health outcomes are really much more a function of our body fat percentage. And we want to do that in a sustainable way, which is not keto, because I sort of joke like you breathe wrong and you knock yourself out of ketosis. So, which is a slight exaggeration, but it's fickle. So there is zero room for error with keto. And that's not a level of commitment that most people have, right? Unless it's really medically necessary, like the kids with epilepsy. And so what happens is that we knock ourselves out of ketosis pretty easily, and then we have to start over to get ourselves back into it. So it's a really unforgiving way to live and potentially has some side effects that most of us aren't really thinking about. But we can get to the same result, removing body fat, eating foods that we love, eating all the time, and living our lives.
Which is so not what we are told and what the media tells us.
Right, I know. I know.
Right? As health coaches, we talk to people all day who, I've had such good luck with keto. I'm fasting. I'm trying this. And we have to pause and not word vomit all of our thoughts of what we know, right? Because it is controversial.
So to that, like I would say to somebody, right? Like, how do you define so good? What are the metrics that we're using? Right? If we're looking at body composition, are we really removing fat? Are we really building lean muscle mass? Can you live this way for the rest of your life? If the answer is no, right, then it's not our plan for life. We got to find something else.
Yes. And ditch the scale.
Yeah.
As you're speaking, that's what I'm thinking, because you see this number go down, but to your point, is it water? Is it muscle? Is it bone? And that's not what we want. But we look at that. And so it sounds like what you're saying is the goal is to stay in that sweet spot of always eating, being consistent. And so how do we really stay in that sweet spot? I know everyone listening is like, okay, so tell me what to do.
Okay, here's the magic. If you're a note taker, write this down. Protein and fiber at every meal makes your moving fat no big deal.
Say it again.
Protein and fiber at every meal makes your moving fat no big deal. Protein is clean, lean protein. I don't care, animal, plant, whatever makes you happy, clean, lean protein. Fiber is vegetables and some fruit. And a meal is really every time you eat. The only difference between a meal and a snack is how much we have at a time, and therefore how long it's going to last us, right? The other thing we need throughout the day is some quality fat, like 2 to 4 times a day. So one day I'll figure out how to get that into the sentence. But for now, protein and fiber at every meal. If you start there, right? Clean, lean protein, vegetables, and some fruit, you'll be fine. Eat what you like, don't eat what you don't like, and move on.
I love that. And something too, I just want to circle back to is with my clients, what I really try and like carefully convince them of is slow weight loss, right? Where you're not seeing these extreme measures because it's just, to me, it's a woo, like you are not going to be able to sustain this. We're going to be having the same conversation a year from now. You're going to be wasting your time and breaking your own heart because you can't keep up with this, and you're miserable the whole time. You're miserable, and then you're also miserable when you gain it back. And so what about if it just takes a little bit more time and we can enjoy our life more? Like, why don't you want that? It's like maddening, but it also keeps me employed. So here we are.
Well, but it's the whole thing of, let's have a conversation of like, if your plan doesn't allow you, like if you are opting out of social plans, if you are opting out of experiencing life, if you don't want to go on that trip because it's going to knock you out of your workout routine, if you don't want to go out to dinner with friends because there's quote unquote nothing for you to eat on the menu, these are giant red flags for us to say we need to reassess. We got to reassess what the plan is. We have to reassess our expectations or what our goals are. And maybe there are times, like I sort of talk about it as like consistency versus intensity, right? I believe consistency is king. There might be moments when we're looking for greater intensity. The greater the intensity, the less consistency. So we might say, I'm going to have a greater commitment. I'm going to do a higher level of intensity for a finite period of time, knowing that that's not the goal to persist at that greater intensity. So we have trade-offs, and sometimes we might choose a little bit more intensity. Fine, as long as we recognize that that's not going to be the pace or choices that we sustain.
I think that's a great point to think about, because there are times in life, like summer is so social here because it's Minnesota. So we have 2 months of nice weather. And so it's like, we want to be outside and everybody's bringing food and treats and ice cream and alcohol and just like way more things that you don't eat all year. So I do think like sometimes you just got to like, okay, this is not the time for me to like go hard and like worry about the scale, which I don't want people to worry about the scale ever, but it's a fact. People do, and it's part of life. And I think it's great to have a coach to talk about these things and like what this can look like in real life. And something people talk a lot about are calories. And so I would love for you to kind of talk a bit about like, but what if I just aim for this amount of calories? And even if it's by like 3 o'clock, I'm not going to go over. And they do see consistent weight loss, right? Like, can you just talk about how calorie in and calorie out isn't always like the end all be all?
Ask a 5-year-old, right? My nephew's 8. He could have answered this years ago. 100 calories of M&Ms or 100 calories of celery. Will they be the same in your body? No. right? We don't need nutrition degrees to know that, right? It's not calories in, calories out. Our body doesn't do the same thing with every kind of calorie. So it's what the calories are made of that actually impact our health and our weight, if that's your focus. But above all, to me, it's health. Instead of calories in, calories out, think quality in, quality out, get up and move more, right? We want quality fuel, protein and fiber. The assumption of calories in, calories out is a function of saying that our body does the same thing with M&Ms and celery, and we know that that's not the case, right? And then at some point, let's talk about the calories out part. At some point, you cannot burn more fuel in a day, right? And still function. So that's not the answer, right? Like we could certainly not eat anything and work out all day. You will not find health, which means it's not calories in, calories out for a lot of reasons, right? So if we think quality in, quality out, get up and move more, right? We put quality fuel in, we have energy, we can do the things that are important to us, we move more throughout the day, we'll get to where we want to be. It's so interesting because, I do a lot with reading food labels and people always tell me, oh, it's, well, I'm doing these calories and whatever. When we cut calories blindly, what we're guaranteed to lose is that water, bone, and muscle. Losing muscle is the most detrimental thing to your metabolic health and your metabolism, right? Muscle dictates metabolism. Muscle is metabolically active. It burns calories even when we're hanging on the couch and watching Netflix. So if we want to burn more fuel all day long, no matter what, and when we're sleeping, we need more muscle. If our food plan is such that our body is eating its own muscle to survive, we're not helping ourselves. Remember in the height of the pandemic when everybody's on Clubhouse, like I remember having debates with these like nutrition dudes about calories in, calories out. And the thing that I would argue is that if what you're eating is protein, fiber, and quality fat, your calories will take care of themselves because your body can regulate lettuce and cucumbers and tomatoes and chicken or chickpeas. Your body cannot self-regulate M&Ms and Sour Patch Kids. There are chemicals in those foods and in chips and bread and a lot of our packaged processed foods that chemically turn off our brain's ability to know when we're full and turn on every taste bud that makes you keep eating. So it's not your fault. You don't suck. This is not you. It's not personal. It's biochemistry that you can't have just one Pringle.
Once you pop, you can't stop.
Exactly. So like it's biochemical, like it's not your willpower, right? And the calorie side of it, if what we're choosing are these other foods, you don't have to worry about it. Stop counting.
Music to our ears.
That stuff made me so obsessive.
No, I'm so glad. There's so many things I could hit on. One being what you said about muscle. I'm so happy that you said that because that's part of the reason that Andrea and I created our own fitness platform that is specifically towards strength training because that's what every woman talks about, right? Is how do I hack my metabolism? What do I have to do? Homie, you need some muscle.
We got you.
We got you.
Move with Gold Ivy, baby.
And also, with me and my experience with my gut health, there's so many people out there talking about why intuitive eating is the way to go, right? And I'm like, you can't intuitively eat if your body is messed up because of biochemistry, exactly to your point. So it's just the more you know, the better you can do. But if you are feeling terrible, you have to start getting some nutrients in your body. And your body will tell you that it feels good, right? You can understand and you can learn more because your body, that biofeedback, it will tell you, oh, I feel a lot better when I eat these veggies versus these M&Ms, these Sour Patch Kids.
And when you feel terrible, you start to get in this shame cycle too of how poorly you're eating. You feel bad about it. And then you're connecting emotions to food, and we all do it, right? We emotionally eat, and so we have these connections. And so I would love for you to talk about that, just kind of the shame cycle that can come with food, with overeating, with eating with your emotions. How do you talk to your clients about this?
this could be like a whole thing onto itself, right? So let's start with understanding that the association of food with emotions, joy and sorrow, right? Every culture across the planet has an association between food and culture and experience and all of those things. That's not the enemy. We don't have to remove experiencing celebrations because it creates this attachment with some sort of food. Okay, so I just want to set that out there. Like, that's not what we're saying, right? The other side is socially, we are often taught not to really feel our emotions. And at the risk of getting too woo-woo, right? Don't be so emotional, they say to girls, right? Boys aren't supposed to cry, right? We learn all of these things that have us, and we learn those things. And then we also don't necessarily learn the full lexicon of words to describe emotions, which leaves us in a place where we don't know how to feel feelings. And it is easier to feel nothing. And it is a maladaptive behavior to turn to food to numb feeling. We can learn something else because it's adaptive, right? So having said all of that, there is an intrinsic connection between the food that we provide ourselves or don't and what's happening in our heads and the mood that we're in. So before we get into sort of all the science stuff of that, do you guys talk much about the vagus nerve?
Yes. Brooke's
Sure do, girl.
Brooke's best friend is the vagus nerve.
So here's what I want everybody to really know about the vagus nerve. Think of it like so first of all, it is the literal connection between the gut and the brain, right? Think of it though like a 5-lane highway. 3 lanes go gut to brain. 2 lanes go brain to gut. You will never outthink the chemistry of what you are putting in your body as fuel and what is happening in your gut. Which is why I always start with the food before we get into the, oh, what do I do in this challenging situation? Right? Because we have to shift what's happening in the gut in order to shift what's happening in our heads. On the sciencey side, our neurotransmitters, our mood, our emotions, all those things are a function of amino acids. Neurotransmitters are built of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. If our body doesn't have what it needs to make those things, we aren't going to feel well. And then we're not really sure how to process the fact that we don't feel well. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to tell somebody what we're actually feeling. And we go, it would make me feel better in this moment, right?
Ice cream.
Right, exactly. The processed sugary foods that continue to fuel that cycle, right? Neurotransmitter imbalance is a direct function of poor dietary choices, toxins like alcohol and mold and exhaust, right? Sensory overload. Hello, modern life, right? I'm always doing 7 things at once. Our genetics certainly play a role. Chronic stress and bowel dysfunction, right? If we're not eliminating or we're not able to absorb our nutrients, we are inherently going to have an imbalance in neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are what are giving us, the feel-good feelings or the resilience that we're looking for in a day and all of these things. And, we can get into nitty-gritty if you want to of like, okay, these foods and this thing and whatever. But a big piece that I really like to talk to people about is called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Okay, if we have low BDNF, we often have low mental affect, age and hormone-related cognitive decline, right? Omega-3s, lack of omega-3s, refined foods, and saturated fats all create a decrease in brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Decreased BDNF leads to anxiety and depression, metabolic disorders, and cognitive decline. It's all connected, right? We have to give our body the building blocks, and you don't have to know like every neurotransmitter under the sun in order to be able to like be in a good mood. It still comes back to the same stuff of protein and fiber at every meal. Fiber is vegetables and fruit, right? That's giving us, especially if we're eating the rainbow, right? Like I'll challenge people, how many colors can you put on a single plate, right? When we're getting the variety, our body is getting the variety of things that it needs, and it can do what it needs to do. Sometimes, most of the time, all the time, we just have to get out of the way. We have to give the body what it needs to do and what it needs, and it'll do the rest. We don't have to figure all that stuff out.
This is what we're talking about. How she explains things in a way we can understand. It's not that complicated, but sometimes we need to hear it from someone in a new way. And I think that was such a great, like that made me want to go meal plan right now. Like,
But you think about food is medicine, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but we make it complicated, right? Let me find the perfect diet. Let me find the perfect meal planning template, when really just start with making sure fiber and protein are on your plate. And once you've got that foundation down, right, you kind of think about it a building block. So then you can, okay, how can I add a little more color, and how can I tweak this a little? But at least start giving your brain, your gut, the fuel that it needs to make you feel okay, so you can make those choices, right? You can make those choices from your logic brain and not from, I need to numb, I feel like crap, let me just
what's wrong with me? Yeah, it's like, well, you might just need a better meal.
Like, girl, maybe you just need a veggie.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like I do a lot of stuff on willpower, right? We think we need willpower. Well, funny enough, willpower is a function of blood sugar. Willpower is a function of nutrition too. And we try to like white knuckle it through all these situations. And the truth is, like, if you ate some quality fuel, everything else gets easier. Like I would bet you, if you spent the next 2 or 3 days, you know, those moments in the day where you're like, the day might start totally fine, and you're like, I am running life right now. And then inevitably, like the phone buzzes and you're like, oh, why? Right? Like, what does this person need from me? And then the email comes in and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do first. Right? If you stopped in that moment and took a carrot and some hummus, in about 20 minutes, you'll be fine. The email, the phone won't bother you, all the things, right? A lot of times when we feel like we can't tackle it, our blood sugar is low. It's one of the first signs that we're hungry, right? Relearning our body. And so we can start to give our body what it needs to be able to handle everything that's coming at us. Stress, by the way, depletes our B vitamins dramatically. Stress like eats all those B vitamins. So if you live a stressful life, meaning like if you live on this planet, right? You might need a greater commitment to B vitamins. You might need a greater commitment to omega-3s, right? Our brain is mostly omega-3s, right? If we're not giving ourselves those things, of course we're going to feel gross. So it's not your willpower, it's chemistry.
And also, how are you planning your day? Are you taking time out of your day to eat? You know, think about how many people we talk to who, oh, I eat at my desk, or, oh, it's 3 o'clock every day. And I look and I'm like, oh, I'll just wait till dinner. Most people, I should say, have the ability to sit down and quick eat.
And I also think work culture is like, everybody's feeling this way. So why don't we set the expectation that we all break to eat? Like any employees that Brooke and I have, you are going to be able to take a break to eat, okay?
And if you brought that to your employer, most employers would be like, yes, please do.
Yes.
But it's just this idea of, oh, I'll just get through it and then I'll end my day quicker. But guess what? The to-dos just keep adding on. So take that break, because you can come to your work with so much more energy, clarity. Your mood's going to be better. Your mood's going to be better when you go home to your family, your kids. Your sleep's going to be better. Like, it's all so interconnected.
And having said that, like those things are so important. And if you're sitting there and going, but I'm in a place where I can't stop and I need food, like eat the food. Maybe another day you can figure out how to stop the work when you eat. Like we don't have to do all these things tomorrow. Right? Like maybe there's a week that you decide to focus on stopping other things while you eat and just see what happens. Right? But like we don't have to try to figure out what we're eating, when we're eating it, and how to stop working while we're doing it, and all the things all at the same time. Like just pick one thing.
It can be overwhelming. And that's why people never get started. That's why they never make a shift, because you think of how this ideal picture of what you want it to look like. And any progress just starts with one small thing, one small tweak.
Just pack a bag of carrots for when you get angry during your workday.
But pack some protein to go with it.
Yes.
Like Jen said. pack
Hummus
some
and carrots, excuse me.
You could do a little nut butter. Am I weird? I like nut butter with carrots. Just saying, if you've never had it.
What kind of nut butter?
I'll do peanut butter or almond butter.
I have heard that. I haven't tried it. I love them both. I've just never put them together.
This is making me hungry. Excuse me. I'm going to go get a sip.
Okay, Brooke got her snack, and now we're ready to move into a term that drives me absolutely bananas. See how I threw another food in there? Clean eating. I just like, what does clean eating even mean? People ask me this all the time, and I'm like, I don't say that because I don't know what it means either. And so I would love your take on clean eating and how you handle that with your clients.
There is not a single definition of clean eating. Any person you ask is going to give you their personal definition, right? And my pet peeve about it is like, well, if something's not clean, what does it make it? Right? And like, I'm all about like living in the gray area, like not the black or the white, but sometimes to understand something, we look to the opposite, right? And it's like, well, if something's not clean, then we think dirty. Well, what are dirty foods? Well, that's not really like, so I agree. I think it is a mess. What I will say is that the best definition I could find out there when I did a whole episode, I'm like, what is clean eating? The best definition I could find is that it is essentially eating foods closer to their natural state. So fruits, vegetables, healthful fats, dairy, lean protein, and anything that has ingredients, those are the ingredients, and there are typically 5 or less. Some people get into like the snowball of like raw food or vegan or gluten-free or like within that, right? A person can sort of find their way. The idea of clean is that we are, I think, minimizing the additives and the new to nature molecules that have found their way into our food to make things that are what I call food-like substances that aren't really food.
What kind of advice do you give when people are like, is it worth it for me to get organic food? Like, what do you say to that?
I'm a big fan of pick your battles, right? Everybody's in a different place with regard to, you know, their priorities and their commitment level and where they are in relation to their goal and where they're at. For some people, choosing raspberries over Skittles is a win. And I want to take that win, celebrate that win. It is worth everything. If we're in a place of saying organic raspberries or regular raspberries, I'm going to choose for me organic raspberries. Right? But not everybody is there. There are certain foods where we may want to prioritize organic than others. There are certain things where I did a deep dive on popcorn, and nobody needs to do this, but long story short, the corn that is used for popcorn is all organic, whether it says it or not. Like they don't do anything to those. So don't pay extra for the popcorn that has organic on the label. Like they don't use GMO corn for popcorn. But right? I mean, who knew? There's a lot of things out there where like these labels end up being more marketing than other things. So I don't have an answer. It's really like Pick your battles. Is that important for you? Great. If it's not, next, right? And the choices that we're willing to make today are also different than the choices we might be willing to make in 6 months. So today might be raspberries over Skittles, and in 6 months, it might be organic blueberries over the not organic raspberries.
I love it. And the thing that I love about your podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, is that you do a deep dive on these things. So if you do want to like hear just about protein or just about like organic versus non-organic, like Jenn does a deep dive on those things where like you really get to learn about it in another like tangible way. But I think it's important that people can have these passions and then be able to teach you the way that you do. And so I would just love for everybody to know where to find you if they want to follow you, hear more from you on all of the beautiful things you talk about with food.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. So Salad with a Side of Fries is the podcast. Wednesdays are full episodes. We dig into all the things. And then Fridays are what I call nutrition nuggets, which are those like 10, 15-minute like deep dives on something. My website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. And then all social media, I am Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. And please, like reach out. I would love nothing more than to hear from you guys. Like, what resonated? What are you like? You know what? I still have this question. Like, send it all.
Yes. Oh, we love that. And we're so excited, like I said earlier, that our audience gets a piece of you because it is science. It is information. You are helping heal everyone. The root cause, really, food, right? The fuel we're putting in our body, but without the judgment, with real and raw advice of everyone can do the things you're saying and do it in a bite-sized way that doesn't feel overwhelming, but they're still feeling better. So we love your approach. We're so happy that you're now in our circle and we're connected. All right, Jenn, we leave our listeners with 3 gold stars. So these are your 3 takeaways for our listeners. Will you please share yours?
All right. Number 1, protein and fiber at every meal. Make sure moving fat, no big deal. Number 2, put the blinders on. Like, know your plan. And then put the blinders on. Ignore what your friend's eating. Ignore what's happening on social media, what the celebrity is doing, all the things that are coming at us. We can learn in time to evaluate those things. Put the blinders on. Stay focused on what you're doing. Small steps in the same direction lead to huge distance over time. And number 3, based on our conversation, is start with the fuel, because we're not going to outthink the fuel. If we're feeling troubled, if we're stressed, if we're tired, start with the fuel. Doesn't need to be a battle of will. It doesn't need to be, this thing is getting the better of you. Like, start with the fuel. It'll get better from there.
Beautiful. Thank you for those. Those are wonderful. All right. Next is Unleashing Ivy. I'm super excited just to ask you more questions because you never know where it's going to go. So we really want to talk about the impact of alcohol in general and with your waistline. So let's dive into it. What do you think everybody gets wrong about alcohol?
Okay, alcohol, we've all been told, right? It's the sugar in the alcohol. It's the sugar in the mixers. It's the food that we eat once we've had a few and we don't care anymore, right? Yes, those things are all considerations, but the truth about alcohol is that it comes back to your liver. So your liver is responsible. The primary job of the liver is detoxification and processing all these things that come into the body. The liver never got the multitasking memo. The liver can only do one thing at a time. And so the liver prioritizes what it tackles based on how toxic it is. So it has to do sugar, it has to do fat, right? But those are less toxic than alcohol, right? We call it intoxicated, right? Alcohol trumps all the toxins. So until the liver has processed all of the toxins out of the body from that alcohol, it will never get to the fat and the sugar and the other things from what we eat. I don't think that anybody has to eliminate alcohol. Like, I love a good cocktail, but I will say we get healthier each day we keep alcohol away. And when I learned this whole thing about the liver, I was like, oh my God, That's why alcoholics develop fatty liver, because the liver is always working on the alcohol and then the fat builds up around the liver. What we see now with the way people eat is what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Pew, mind blown. Love it. It's the more you know. And what I love and what I found in my healing journey is you can't unlearn these things, right? If you are serious about losing weight, getting healthier, for me, it was not feeling like crap every day. And I learned about the liver. I'm like, oh, so every time I eat this way or drink this way, my poor liver, like this is so sad. And the stories you start to tell yourself, the way you start to think, it changes because you learn different things and you learn it in a way that speaks to you. Everyone's so different. So I really hope that people that are struggling maybe with alcohol just heard something that Jenn said that spoke with them.
I send like love to my liver after I drink and I feel it like quaking. I'm like, I am so sorry I did that to you. Like I'm going to take the next 5 days off.
So why do we do it? You know, I mean, that could be its own conversation. I'll just stop right there. But thank you for that answer, Jenn. My question kind of plays into that is it's the summer, right? So people are busier. There's more social gathering. So what piece of advice do you have for people who want to go out, they want to be in with their friends, but they're still wanting to make healthy choices?
All right. So my favorite tip for these things, and also what I talk about with people for Thanksgiving. Okay. Keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is being with the people. So go be with the people, have the conversation, do the things. The main thing is not the hot dog. It's just not. So keep the main thing, put the focus where it needs to be, and take care of yourself for all the other things. So for the things that we do want to indulge in, because like, especially with certain holidays, like, I don't know, maybe for you, 4th of July is not 4th of July without eating apple pie. Like, I don't know, maybe that's your thing. So one of the things we talk about is the 3-bite rule. So this is neuroscience. Neuroscience tells us the only bites that we actually taste are the first, the second, and the last. And I think it's a function of like what we're actually paying attention to when we have whatever. So if those are the only ones that we're really tasting, especially for something that's not health promoting, maybe those are the only ones we need. So maybe we can have 3 bites of the potato salad or the pasta salad or whatever the thing is, the apple pie. Or maybe like it's not 4th of July to you without apple pie and 3 bites is not going to cut it. Fine, have the apple pie, but how much apple pie do we have to feel like we had it? 3 bites might not work, but I'm pretty sure it's also not half the pie. So keep the main thing, use the 3-bite rule. So, you know, like if you went grocery shopping and you bought a dozen eggs, and then on the way home, like you accidentally like dropped one or cracked one. What would you do with the other 11?
Keep them.
Yeah. We like protect them a little. Like we make sure that we don't like break another one accidentally. So, okay, you have the barbecue that's maybe that broken egg. Didn't quite go as planned. When we throw in the towel, when we go, oh, screw it, right? I call it the F-its. It's like taking the other 11 eggs and dumping them on the ground. Like there was nothing wrong with them. What did the one, right? So what does that look like for the rest of our day? Maybe we make sure we get a quality breakfast. We get our activity in that day. We do all the other things that we can do that are part of our plan and enjoy the indulgent thing and move on.
Love that. Because I think our society is we're all so all or nothing. Like I think there's something with the brain too that it's all or nothing. So just giving people that permission is so helpful.
And when you get that feeling, like think about them as the other 11 eggs. Like you would never dump the other 11 eggs. Don't do it.
Yeah, I think it's like it's the excitement of going all in on something, or it's like I am just totally chilling and I'm doing nothing. You know, like there's something that's kind of enjoyable in those things. Like Einstein Jr. said, like you should never get bored with the basics because the basics are over time are just gonna make you feel good and help you with your goals. And so if you can romanticize those things, like I really crushed drinking water today.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like those can be Jenn's eggs, right? One egg could be hydration. One egg could be exercise. Yeah. Looking at it that way. Yeah. Super helpful.
All right. Last question. If you could go back and tell younger Jenn something, what would you go back and tell her?
Just relax. It's all going to be fine. Like I'm so like the type A and, all those things. And what I've learned now in the last 4 years of also working on myself and meditating and all the things is like, you can actually do more by doing less. Find the quiet, do less, relax. It's all going to be fine.
I love it. Something that we cannot hear enough. So thank you.
Yeah. We all need the reminder every day. Yeah.
Well, this was so fun. I feel like we could talk about food all day with you. So we'll have to have you back and talk some more about a million other questions we have. I feel like it could be like an Ask Jenn session. But thank you for being here and taking time with us and breaking it down this way so that we can all feel better, take better care of ourselves. And I never put nutrition first. And this is like screaming at me. Like this summer, let's take care of the gut health before we even think about what's wrong with us up in our head. And so thank you so much for that reminder.
Yeah. Thank you guys. This is such a pleasure. I know we could talk for forever. So thanks.
Yeah. The thing is, if you don't make it a priority now, your wellness, right, you're going to have to make your illness a priority later. And no one wants to do that. So make those small changes, where focus goes, energy flows. And so pick something that Jenn said and just experiment with it and see how you feel. All right, Jenn, we leave our listeners with a piece of gold, a quote that speaks to you. Will you please share yours?
I don't know why this is coming to me in this moment, but I'm just going to say it because it is. It's not the golden rule of, treat others as you would like to be treated. It's the platinum rule of treat others as they want to be treated.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.